Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for hopping on today. I have an amazing author with me today. Her name is Cecilia Dominic, and I'm super excited to talk about her books and her writing journey. How are you today, Cecilia?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kaya. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How is it living in Georgia? I've never been there yet, so tell me a little bit about it.
Yes, a lot of people have been through our airport, but they've not actually been outside of the airport into the city. Although I admit I do have maybe a little bit of mean thrill being like, yeah, y'all go check, get your connections. I'm just gonna go home now. Uh, but it's uh, it's interesting because it's like a big city in a small town all at the same time. Like my husband and I live in a part of the city that feels like a small town. It's called Decatur. And so we get all of the benefits of being in the big city during normal times, like, having a symphony and having Broadway plays come through and nice restaurants. And still, like if I want to, I can walk to my office. We have coffee shops nearby. It's really nice. We have the best of both worlds.
That's really cute. So it's like a quaint little city almost.
Yes, it's like a city within a city.
Oh, I love that. Um, Take me back to your writing journey. I want to know where you started. Why did you decide to start writing a book? And how did you find the publishing process?
So my mother swears that I wrote my first story when I was 2. And while it lacked in character and plot development, it had a lot of enthusiasm. Apparently, it was about a bunny. And I still need to ask her, like, okay, when you clean out the attic at some point, you got to find this thing. She swears she still has it.
That's so
so,
cute.
so I've written pretty much my entire life. I wrote little stories all through grade school and short stories and longer stories through college and grad school when it felt a little bit forbidden, because of course I was in psychology grad school where you're supposed to be all serious and only write boring scientific things. And so it was a big revelation when I stumbled across a copy of Writer's Digest and was like, holy crap, people get paid for this. So I started writing a novella, and then I noticed that I wanted to talk about The Wolf's Shadow, which was actually my first published novel. And so we could talk about the inspiration for that. But I got it published because I was part of the Georgia Romance Writers, and one of the editors from Samhain Publishing came and did a talk, and they invited submissions. And I was like, you know what? I'll go for it. I've been doing some querying with agents and other small publishers, and this was actually the one that stuck. I got an email the following January, so a good 7-8 months later, with, hey, is this book still available? And so I got the email, and I was like, I blinked a couple of times, and I clutched the edge of my desk and told my husband, holy cow, I think this is it. I think this is the email. And he was like, okay, breathe. And so it turned out to be an email from my awesome editor, Holly Atkinson, who published or recruited me for Samhain. I was with her for all of my books there, and she's actually still my editor, which I'm really thrilled about.
Wow, that's amazing. What? So between that, because 7, 8 months, a lot of people are like, that's such a long time. Realistically, it's not when you are waiting for feedback. Like it can take
Yep.
years. So had you kind of forgotten about it a little bit, or were you submitting perhaps elsewhere, or what was your focus on during that time?
I was definitely submitting elsewhere.
Mm.
And I believe, yeah, I had submitted, and then I got a partial request and then a full request. And then I think it's about 6 months had gone by, and I was like, hey, you guys still interested? Give them a little nudge. And then they got back to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank you. So that was back in 2013. So yeah, it's been a while.
7 years now. You're basically a veteran in this field. Just like, I've seen it all. No, I'm kidding. Well, yeah, let's actually talk about the inspiration for that first book. What made you want to, how did you find writing your first big novel?
So I had no idea what I was doing. Like I had written a novella that ended up being the first part of Truth Seeker, which is the sort of the prequel novella in my Dreamweavers and Truth Seeker series, and was like, okay, I'm ready to tackle a full-length novel. And at that point, I was on internship at the Central Arkansas Veterans Health Administration in Little Rock, and which is another fun small city. It was surprisingly fun to live there. And so we were getting veterans from all over, because it's the flagship VA basically for the central part of the country. And so they were coming down from the Ozark Mountains. And The Ozarks are interesting. They are very creepy at night, as I found on a side trip one time. And so they would come down and they would have all these really interesting stories about the strange things that they'd seen in the woods. And of course, I was like, oh, tell me more. So I was like, okay, what would be a really good creature for in the Ozark Mountains? And that's when I decided, okay, werewolves. Werewolves could be interesting. Plus, being a psychologist, it's fascinating to me. Okay, so they're animals and they're humans, and are they going to have trouble shifting between the animal and humans part of their brain? Spoiler alert, they do. So let's take this and run with it. And so that's how it was originally called Wolfspade Manor when I was pitching it. It was originally published as Mountain Shadow, and then this past year I changed the title to make it more genre consistent. And this is also its fourth cover, and it's called The Wolf Shadow now.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's so okay. So this is one of my questions I have for you. Mm-hmm. Your day job, you are a clinical psychologist, and so
Correct.
That really intrigues me because a lot of, as a lot of writers already know, a lot of the character development does come down to some kind of form of psychology, because you need to really understand your character. You need to understand their patterns, their triggers, what's realistic in their personality profile. So I'm curious as to what angle you go in with it as, because you were just talking then as to how they would go from animal to human. So tell me more, like how does that work for you?
Okay, so first I'll go ahead and reassure people that I do not put my patients in my books.
Disclaimer,
yes. I am a health psychologist, which means that I am very brain and body focused, and my very, very niche subspecialty is actually behavioral sleep medicine. So my main job is I help people sleep without drugs. And so I mostly treat insomnia.
My aunt needs you.
That's typically what people will say. So I decided to come prepared in case you had anybody who needs help. I have self-published a book called Better Sleep for the Overachiever under my actual for real name.
Amazing.
For people who have insomnia issues and who have this personality type that I see over and over again, and might also have myself, that kind of overachiever type A personality. So that really helps me with my books, because when I'm dealing with characters who are going through things, or with the werewolves, it's like, okay, what parts of the brain are affected? And in the second Lycanthropy Files book, there's actually a substance that keeps them from changing. So, okay, what part of the brain does that act in? What is it most similar to what we already know? And so it's just a lot of fun from that perspective. Plus, in my Dreamweavers and Truth Seekers series, yes, that's what it's called. I need to come up with a shorter series name for that one. Part of it occurs in the collective unconscious, which brings in all of my sleep stuff. Although I don't do dream interpretation clinically, it's kind of fun. So although, all that stuff is cool, I think the biggest help that my career has been to help me to live vicariously. Like, I think there's actually a quote, it comes up occasionally when I'm using BookBrush, about how, a man only lives one life unless he reads books, in which case he lives 100 of them. They might be George R.R. Martin, could be misquoting that. And so I feel like that helps with my clinical work helps me with that as well, is that I feel like I have lived vicariously. Like, obviously I have my own experience, but at this point I've talked to thousands of people and heard thousands of experiences and reactions. And so I can definitely draw on bits and pieces of that.
So, okay, this is going to be a hard one to answer then.
Okay.
Who has been your favorite character to write and why?
Oh, that one is actually easy because I'm currently writing her and I'm absolutely in love with her. So that would have to be the exiled Fae Reyna from the Fae Files.
Okay. They're beautiful covers, by the way. I have to add that, sorry.
Oh, thank you. So different cover designers. This one is, let's give them a shout out, Melody Paradise.
Amazing.
This one is Lorraine Van Tonder of Ren Katrin art design. She also does my Inspector Davidson mysteries and does a beautiful job with those. So yeah, I've been very fortunate. Yay for Facebook for connecting me with all these people, because Melody, I think, is in South Carolina, so she's not too far, but Lorraine is in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so her emails always come in at interesting times.
So what about your character there? Why is she your favorite to write?
So she is 500 years old, so she's got all of this perspective. She's also very conflicted about who she is, which is what makes her so interesting. Like identity and self-acceptance are huge themes in my books, and she pretty much embodies that theme like throughout. So in each one of the books, she's dealing with a different struggle in that area and figuring out, okay, so she's Fae, but she's been exiled, so she's been living in the human world for several hundred years, so she's picked up some of those traits. And who is she? How does she belong? As she gets more responsibilities, how is she going to manage that? And then, of course, there's a slow burn romance with a gargoyle who's been a traditional enemy of the Fae. So, yeah.
I like that. That's very, I have to admit, I haven't heard of that before, which I'm very intrigued now. I want to read that.
Thank you. Yes, that was definitely my mythology that I made up. The gargoyles were originally the guardians, but then something happened, which is going to come out in the next few books to change all that. And so it's okay, can they reconcile in time for the gargoyles to help with the major challenge that's coming up?
So what does your routine look like then? You have a day job.
Mm-hmm.
Then when do you squeeze the time in to write? How long do you think it takes you to write a book?
That has been an evolving process, definitely. So yes, The Wolf Shadow took me probably a good 4 years to get the first draft, and then of course more for revisions. And then of course there was all the editing that happened after the publisher took it. Now, and disclaimer, I've now written 20 novel and novella length books.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, The Shadowed Path was number 20. 18 were published, 2 of them are still unpublished. And it's, at this point, I can do it in, let's say 3 or 4 months because I have a system. At this point, I use John Tribby's Blockbuster 6 software, which is really helpful with getting out plot lines and characters and character arcs. It's just a really good way to keep it all organized. And then I will draft in Scrivener, which I like because it helps me to move things around and I can see balance of POV. So as for the day-to-day, it depends. Like on days like, say, Tuesday, when I had 7 patient appointments, I don't really have the mental energy for a lot of writing. So I think that night I was like, okay, I've got a deadline in April. I have to do something. So I think I wrote for like 10 minutes. When I have more time, I will write more. I typically do it in 30-minute sprints, and I'm fortunate that I write quickly, both because I've prepared and also I do.
How many words would you write in 30 minutes?
In 30 minutes, I can typically write about 1,000 to 1,500, depending on what how things are flowing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Definitely helps write a book quickly. Then I want to say.
Yes, I mean, I have tried dictation and I kind of go back and forth on it. It does end up with some funny typos it takes a while to catch, but yeah, I would like to try to do it a little bit more.
One of the things I want to talk about is you are a USA Today bestseller. So 1, congratulations.
Thank you.
2, I want to know what book that was for and when did you realize you're on the list? And of course, how did you celebrate?
Yeah, so this was one of those team efforts. It was with a box set called Rogue Skies, and that was back in September 2019. So the book that I had in it was The Art of Piracy, which is the first Inspector Davidson mystery, which is the first in my spin-off series from my Ether Psychics. And here's another Rin Catron Art Designs cover. I think this is probably my favorite.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, thank her. So, yeah. So it was really interesting because it was a lot of hustle. Like I don't think I've ever hustled like that in my entire life, trying to get people to buy it, trying to do marketing efforts for it. And so it was one of those things where we were getting updates on, okay, you sold this many on this many vendors, you probably have to do this, 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 and this. And my very last day of the window, we were actually down in Rosemary Beach on vacation. And my husband was like, "Are you going to actually vacation?" I'm like, "Yes, after midnight tonight, I'm going to vacation." So we found out the Wednesday after that. And my husband and I had just come back from the little gym in Rosemary, and we were at a little cafe waiting for our to-go lunch orders. And, of course, I'd been obsessively checking my phone, and he checked his and did something so that he could force the date to pull up with a new list. And he showed me, and it was just like huge sigh of relief. It's like, oh my gosh, we did it. We hit it number 104.
Wow.
Yes. And so we made steak and lobster tail that night, and I went out to dinner another night after that. And yes, it was great. And yes, while I would love to eventually have a USA Today bestseller on my own, like, I'm still in contact with the people from that box set, and I'm just really thrilled to have been part of that team, because they're all just really such great people and such great writers.
What would you say then your greatest challenge and greatest accomplishment has been so far in your writing career?
Oh, wow. Okay, so greatest challenge before the pandemic was trying to separate my concept and motivation of myself as a writer from book sales. And I've had this conversation with other writers as well, is that if your books aren't selling well, it's really hard to get motivated to write more, which is, of course, not the point, not why we're writing. So trying to separate that out. After the pandemic, like, I actually had to delay the release of The Shadowed Path, which is actually going to be coming out next Tuesday. So I'm glad we're talking today. Yay! Yes, because just between things getting really busy at the practice, because I'm sure, as you can imagine, people are needing more help with sleep and anxiety these days, plus just, dealing with all of this on my own. I just, again, didn't have the mental and emotional energy for it. So I was very happy to be able to pick it back up. And it actually forced me to get back to my why. Like, why do I write? And a big part of it is to escape. And so it's been another reason I've loved the Fae Files, is because they've allowed me to escape and do things that I haven't been able to do. Like, the second one, Shadows of the Heart, is set at a fictional con, like we were talking about before you started the recording, at FaeCon. So that was how I got to go to a fantasy convention last year, even though I couldn't actually do it.
It's so interesting, because everything that you just said, I think, is quite common, I want to say, amongst authors, in the sense that after you've been doing this for a couple of years, you kind of hit, I want to say, not everyone's journey is different, but you do feel like there's a slight stagnation, because you're focusing on the marketing and the sales, and it's a real business at this point, and the flutters of what you're doing from the beginning have kind of receded, and you really need to remind yourself as to why you started writing in the first place. So that's very important. And I think you raised another good point too, when you were saying that you, on those days, you just weren't emotionally, like, you weren't there, you didn't have the energy for it. And I think it's very, and I say this often on here, we need to be kind to ourselves, because a lot of people are like, I need to get this amount of words done, I need to do this. And then they're quite critical and harsh on themselves if they don't meet self-expectations. And the thing is life happens. And sometimes you are tired from the day, or sometimes, like, it's okay to make exceptions for yourself. I've met a lot of very self-critical people in this industry, because they just beat themselves up when they don't meet their expectations, and sometimes they're unrealistic expectations. What would you say is your most memorable reader moment?
So this actually overlaps with the greatest accomplishment in my career. So a few years ago at Dragon Con, which is the big sci-fi fantasy convention here in Atlanta, it's like Comic-Con, but about 3/4 of the size. So it's still pretty huge. And I was on a panel actually on the alternate history track. And a reader came up to me after the panel and said, "I love the Lycanthropy Files. I've read them several times. I just wanted to let you know." And I stood up and I gave her a hug over the table, because I was like, "Thank you." So that is my most memorable reader moment, and that is my biggest accomplishment, is writing books that connect with people in that way, that it's so meaningful for them because, I can maybe tell you 20 books I've read multiple times. Only a couple of series I've actually read multiple times. So the fact that my book's connected with somebody to that degree, I was just so excited.
That's amazing. And that's what we're here for. And again, the same thing is why are we doing this? There's something really magical about when you have connected with somebody who was once a complete stranger, and yet somehow you're connected because of the words that you wrote. There's no feeling like it.
No, definitely.
What would you say? So talking about marketing and sales and sometimes finding those readers who haven't yet found us, what are your 3 top marketing tips?
So that depends on where you are in your career. So I would say for the early career people, focus on the things that are more accessible and don't cost a lot of money, like newsletter swaps, for example. Basically focus on networking with other authors and see how you can help each other out. Number 2, figure out what kind of marketing you enjoy. Like, I think I'm a little weird among authors that I actually do enjoy the paid marketing game. Maybe it's a little like gambling because, I'm a psychologist. I do have a research background and I'm not doing research now, I'm doing all clinical work. So this is my way that I can be like, okay, let me change this variable. Let's see what happens, because it's all about human behavior. So they're all experiments to me, which brings me to number 3, which is watch your spending really closely, because I have definitely made a lot of mistakes, especially recently. Like I had an Amazon ad that took off and was actually spending its full budget every single day. Thankfully, it was just a $5 a day ad. But I actually had a few of those happen, and I checked my ad spend in the middle of the month and I was like, oh my gosh, where's all this money going? It's like, oh, that's what happened. So that's a recent reminder for me.
So where would you say that, I know there's the big debate, focus on Facebook ads or Amazon ads, or if there is another option that you choose, what do you go towards more, or do you do both?
So I have lost so much money on Facebook that at this point, I don't do a lot of it. I've actually hired a publicity company to help out with that because I figure they can do it better than I can. So I pretty much do all of my Amazon ads myself. And I'm fortunate that my office manager is very good at finding and compiling keyword lists for me. So all I have to do is upload them and start the ads. Yeah, because that's the hard part. So those are where I focus mainly. And I've also been playing a little bit with BookBub ads, which, because I'm published wide and would love to reach those other readers, that's still very early in my experimentation.
Okay. Then I won't ask any more questions because BookBub is, I don't want to use the word difficult, but it's definitely a new challenge, I want to say, for a lot of authors. Yes. And a lot of authors give up, I want to say, before they go the full stretch. But some people have massive success on it. So we're going to keep in touch because I'd love to hear how that goes.
Definitely.
What are okay, so anything that is fantasy is obviously has a lot to do with character development, which we've already discussed, but also world building. And I'm curious as to what tips you would offer writers who are either writing the first book or even if they've been doing it for a while. What are your 3 top tips to writing urban fantasy thrillers?
So with regards to world building, the fun thing about urban fantasy is that it's our world, but with fantastic elements. So it's figuring out, what do you want to have different or unique or interesting or magical about the world? And so in that case, it's like, what do you wish was magical about the world? And go from there, because that's going to make it fun. Also, if you're going to be doing urban fantasy thrillers, a lot of times it does follow a single character throughout several books. I mean, like Canterbury Files and the other ones are a little bit different because they're groups of characters and each one focuses on a different dyad, a different romantic pair. The Fae Files are the first ones where I've actually focused on a character through multiple books, and that's because I absolutely love the character. And so, yes, find or develop a character that you feel like you can spend a lot of time with, because if you get to book 4 and you absolutely hate them, it's just not going to be fun. And then the other one is to be very aware of hidden biases and stereotypes that might creep into your writing. So, for example, a big unconscious one that a lot of people in this country have is to automatically equate evil with dark. And so I intentionally try not to do that.
In what sense?
So sometimes, a lot of times villains have dark hair, for example.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so I've sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's, you know, when you're doing physical characteristics for characters, just be very careful to not reflect things that maybe we have been taught as a society that are hurtful or harmful.
Yeah, that is an amazing tip. Like I love that. That is not one that I've heard before, but it is self-explanatory in all its ways, and it's something that, like, quite on it, like as I write, I'm quite conscious about it because I like a bit of a variety in my characters. But I never thought that that's something that people subconsciously wouldn't even think about. That's a really good tip.
Thank you.
What is the dream that you were chasing? What's your ultimate goal for your writing career?
I would love for my writing career to bring in as much money as my practice currently does, and to have it be a true second career rather than a side gig. Because, you know, at this point, it's definitely a side gig. At this point, it's definitely not a hobby because I am making at least a little bit of money at it. But yeah, I would like for it to be more self-sustaining, and which would then give me the freedom to do more of it and to have, you know, half my working time be practice and half my working time be writing, rather than it being, you know, more like 80-20.
What would you say you get out of your books the most when you're writing? For you, what do you get out of it? What's the reward for you?
It's all about figuring out the puzzles. Yep, the puzzles. And, you know, also, as I mentioned, the escape, because that's why I've written since I was a kid, is to just be in a different world.
This is like really weird. I'm like, are we soul sisters? Because I often refer to when I'm having issues in my plots, and I'm just like, I just need to figure out what that piece of the puzzle is. I'm like, it's not clicking. I'm like, there's something that I'm looking for. And then, you know, you get a piece of the puzzle and it clicks, and everyone's like, why are you talking about the puzzles? I've never heard another author refer to it as a puzzle either. So I'm just like, who are you? Yeah. Hello, soul sister.
Yes. Okay. So my absolute favorite part is when my brain drops something in early on, and I'm like, I have no idea why this is here. But then later on, I'm like, brain, you're brilliant.
Yes. Or you go through a couple of books and you're just like, I still don't understand why this has happened. And then it's like the biggest mind-blowing plot twist. And you're just like, I don't know where that came from, but I'm grateful.
Yes. Like the one that comes to mind immediately was back in the Ether Psychics books, the Marquis de Monceau. He dresses in a very eccentric style, like basically from the previous century, bright colors, velvets and ruffles and stuff. And I come to find out in The Art of Piracy that he's actually a couple of 100 years old. A wizard cursed his family. And that's why. And I'm like, that was like 4 books ago. Really? Okay, but that works.
What books do you have coming up? What should we be on the lookout for?
So this year, I'm trying to get back to the rapid release model for the Fae Files. So book 3 is coming out next Tuesday. I'm currently writing book 4, aiming for it to be out in June. And then the next one in the fall, and then the next one in January. And then I'm also hoping to at least start writing the next Inspector Davidson mystery, which is the next one in the series I just showed you. And that's because that one's going to get written in bits and pieces over the year, because I'm part of a critique group. And they get frustrated with me because I write faster than the rest of them. And so a lot of the times they only get the first 2 or 3 sections of all of my books. So I'm like, okay, if I write this one across the year, then you'll be getting regular sections of it throughout the year. And that will also, it's also going to be an experiment to see if I can work on 2 projects at the same time.
That'll be interesting. I'm curious. Sorry, this is like side question. When you do your characters, do you create honestly kind of like profiles for them, almost like what their, what their habits are, obviously, physical appearance, but what their personality type is and things like that. Do you do something similar to that?
Sometimes not quite in as much detail. It's all about the motivation. And that's one of the great things about the BP6 software is it's like, okay, what are 3 weaknesses? What is their moral argument? Like, why do they justify why they do? And it's got a bunch of other things as well.
I need to check out this program. This sounds really good.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. It's honestly, the interface is a little early 2000s, but apparently they're working on updating it.
Well, hopefully by the time I get onto it, they've updated. I'm kidding.
Yes.
I have a segment. It's called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a romantic date. I have lit a candle for you. That's the gentleman I am. So my first question is, what's one of the clumsiest moments you've had?
Oh, there's so many. Biggest one, when I was in high school, I leaned out, put my hand out, expecting to find a wall, and there was a fire extinguisher, and I put my hand through the glass of the fire extinguisher case. Luckily, I did not injure myself seriously. I had a couple of cuts. That was it.
That's quite a lot of thought. Like, did you like? That was
they apparently they break fairly easily.
Wow, that's a good one. I love asking these questions because I can imagine it. I'm glad you didn't hurt yourself, though. This is the main point of this. I'm glad you did not hurt yourself.
Thank you. And it was right in front of the guy I had a huge crush on too.
Oh my gosh. That's classic. That's a classic like part in it. Oh, I love that. Okay. Have you ever written that to a book out of curiosity?
No. The only clumsy moment that's made it into a book was when I cut my thumb on the foil of a wine bottle, trying to get a bottle of wine open. Oh, and my hero in my one contemporary romance novel, that ends up happening to him. So every time that, yeah. So if that happens again, my husband and I refer to it as pulling a Seth.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
So first one is definitely determined. This one comes from other people. I've been described as strategic, sometimes ruthless.
Oh, I like that.
Yes, and then the third one, I hope that I'm compassionate, but I definitely strive to be.
Those are good qualities. I love after ending with compassion, I'm like, I love ruthless.
I try to balance it out.
Yeah, you need balance. As long as you're ruthless and then you've got compassion about it too, it's fine. Yeah. What song best describes you?
So this was probably the hardest question. And so I would have to say U2's A Sort of Homecoming from the Unforgettable Fire album. Okay. Because it's got this drive towards coming to center, coming to home, but also sometimes the difficulty of finding that. And it's not coincidence that my books all have this theme of self-acceptance and trying to figure out who you are, because obviously I've got 2 careers, so I might have a little trouble with this whole single identity thing.
That's awesome. So you find that perhaps exploring it through characters, maybe it's a bit therapeutic for yourself as well?
Definitely.
What is your life motto?
So I actually did a class with my friend Maggie Worth a few years ago, and it was all about figuring out, what is your mission statement? And so I'm lucky that I've got one. It's to help others find self-compassion and to see the world in a more compassionate way through my books and my practice.
I love you. You're sweet. I can already tell I want to go on a second date with you. You're sweet.
Oh, excellent.
You're like, yes, this is going well. Or you could maybe answer the next one incorrectly. I'd be like, oh, that's a red flag for me. No, I'm kidding. What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not many people know of?
So if the practice and the writing don't work out, I want to be a cake decorator.
Oh, do you do a lot of cake decorating?
I do it very occasionally, but if I can share my screen, I can show you some of my creations from the past.
Can we do that? Maybe, yes. If we
If we're on Zoom, you can let me.
Oh, okay. Ooh, yes. Okay. Because I love cake.
Okay, so can you see these guys?
Yes.
So these are pumpkin patch cupcakes that I did. So it's chocolate icing with buttercream, pumpkins, and vines.
Wow.
And I did that as a treat. I attended the Decatur Citizens Police Academy class back in 2017. And so it was my turn to bring snacks. So I was like, I'm going to show off a little bit. And so I brought pumpkin patch cupcakes. And then these were cupcakes that I brought. My birthday happened to be the same night as a meeting. So I brought cupcakes for that. And then this was the top of my birthday cake.
I've only got the pumpkin one still.
Oh, okay. So let's see. So stop share, and then I'll do this one. Okay, so can you see these guys? The cake?
Oh my goodness. How did you do the flowers?
So they're buttercream, and it's different icing tips that you use. So you got some roses, you got some violets, because I'm a February baby. And then these are my first attempts at daffodils.
These are awesome.
Thank you.
Who are you? No wonder you have an identity, right? I'm like, who are you? You're too talented for your own good at numerous things.
Thank you. So do I get a second date? As you can see, I like chocolate.
Yeah, I love cake, and they've got flowers on top. Yes, please. Next time you can take me on a date. That would be lovely.
Okay, excellent.
That was a successful date. But I've had so much fun. Tell us, where do we find you? Where do we stalk you?
So you can stalk me at my website, CeciliaDominic.com, and that's CeciliaDominic.com. People try to put an extra E in Cecilia, so I have to clarify. You can also find me on Facebook, Cecilia Dominic Author, on Instagram at Random Enophile, which is pretty much food, cat, and wine pictures. Honestly, not a lot of writing, but yeah, if you want to see the world's cutest kitty, since he's sound asleep, and on Twitter at Cecilia Dominic. And I do have a Pinterest account, although I don't ever use it, and I know I need to turn in my girl card for that, but I will figure it out eventually.
Yes. Well, I'm going to follow you on those. I'll probably have to get you to type through to me what your Instagram one is, because I definitely want to see all the cupcakes and wines and kitty videos and photos. But thank you so much for coming on today. I've had such a blast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Yes, it's been so much fun. Yeah,
absolutely. I am going to turn us off, so I am going to talk to you later. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Will do. Bye.
Bye.